What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. I'm Isaiah, and today I invite you to pull up a chair, grab a snack and a tasty beverage, and let me talk at you for a minute. Today I'd like to talk at you about a game that is not even properly finished yet. I'm going to be sharing and talking to you about some playtest rules, but the game and the setting and the theme is so cool that I'm just not going to wait on the actual book. When the actual book is released, I will do my best to get my hands on it. And then we may talk about that book too. But today we're going to talk about Trench Crusade. Now, as I mentioned, we are talking about a set of playtest rules that they've released, and these are free. You can go out there and get them. I will do my best to remember to put a link in the description. If you want to go grab the playtest rules, put it on the table, check it out, see if you like it. I'll maybe offer them some feedback. So the game is a weird history kind of game. They have released a very, I think it's like 60-something pages, I think, lore primer about what's going on here. But essentially what has happened is during one of the Crusades, the forces of hell were released into our world. And since the Crusades, it's now 1911, 1914-ish, this battle between the forces of heaven and hell has been ongoing for about 1,000 years. And so things have gotten crazy. In the playtest rules, it only covers 2 of the factions, but there are some other factions in the game. It has a fairly limited number of scenarios. It's enough for you to check it out, get a feel for it, and then help them hone it down and get it dialed in. But the setting is really, really cool. The art that's in here is really, really, really cool. Just quality, grim, dark, cool stuff. It is a skirmish game, but it is kind of a large skirmish game. So you're looking 10 to 30-ish models. So more skirmish in terms of like Blood and Plunder type size games, it seems. Which is okay, a little bit of extra work, but not a big deal there. It plays on a 4x4 or a 3x3. Things are done in inches. You need 8 D6s, and then you need some type of token to represent the blood markers, which is a pretty cool mechanic that it took me a little bit to brain my brain around. The game is alternating activations, and it is the person with the highest number of models in their force on the table that has the first activation in the round. If that is a tie, then a D6 roll-off will settle things. Now, when it is your turn to activate your model, you can perform as many actions as your character is able to complete, but you can only do each thing once, so you can't attack, but you could shoot, move, dash, etc. Now, there will be some limitations based on the particular unit about what they may or may not be able to do. Some actions are classified as risky actions, in which case you have to roll on the action success chart, which is a 2d6 roll plus or minus modifiers. On a 2 to 6 you fail, on a 7 to 11 you have a success, and on a 12 plus you have a critical success. That would be for most of your attacks, things like that, maybe a retreat. And then anything that is labeled as a risky action. If at any time you fail on that chart roll, that model's activation ends immediately. So it kind of gives me slightly Blood Bowl vibes there, because you want to make sure you do the things that you know that you can do before you start doing the things that you may or may not be able to do. Also worth noting in this little side blurb right beside the action success chart is that you are allowed to measure distance unless a rule for a unit or an attack specifically tells you not to. Pre-measuring is allowed. Your action options are to move, charge, dash, climb, retreat, attack with a ranged weapon, attack with a melee weapon, or any other actions, as you may have special actions on the unit's rule card. We then come to plus dice and minus dice, which is the main form of modification in the game. So those plus dice and modest dice modifiers that you will see in the rulebook are applied to your rolls on the action success chart. If you have plus dice, you add those to those 2d6. So if you were starting at 2d6 and you had plus 1 dice, you would roll 3d6, and then you would select the 2 highest numbers that you roll for your chart. On a minus dice roll, you do the same thing, but you are selecting the two lowest numbers. So there's a much, much better chance of failing, because you have to take the lowest numbers if you have minus dice modifiers. So that's a pretty powerful modifier, the same way the plus dice is a pretty powerful modifier. It seems like it's going to be very impactful. We then come to blood markers and blessing markers. And this was one that I actually had to go to the Facebook group to make sure that I understood it properly. So blood markers represent pretty much any kind of trauma that you would suffer. Wounds, shell shock, your mind just breaking, all that panic, all that kind of stuff. They're represented by a marker or a red dice of some sort. I usually will use a counter. I don't really like having dice on the table because it's too easy for them to get knocked over. If you're going to use dice, maybe I would put them on the character sheet or the unit's card. Your opponent is the one who gets to use them. So their opponent can use them in 2 ways. First way is when you are spending dice or when you're doing an action, something where you have to roll in the action success chart. They can spend 1 or more blood markers to give you -1 dice to those success chart rolls, and then they can be used to add dice to injury chart rolls. Again, multiple dice can be used in that manner. Blessing markers work the exact same way, but in reverse. So where the blood marker would give you -1 dice to your action stuff, the blessing marker gives you +1. And where the blood marker would give you +1 to your injuries, the blessing markers give you -1. And you get to choose, you, the activating player, get to choose when to use your blessing markers, not your opponent. So nifty, fun. That seems like a fun little mechanic of back and forth and keeping you engaged even when it's not your activation. When we come to movement, and unless something specifically says that model can't move, like if it's a giant artillery piece or something like that, maybe, you always get to move according to whatever the movement on your profile says. It is pretty much the only time that you can perform an action where you do not have to roll on the action success table. So you always get to move. In Trench Crusade, there are 4 types of terrain: open, difficult, dangerous, and impassable. Open includes crossing obstacles up to 1 inch high. You can get over a low fence or a wall or something like that for free. Difficult costs 2 movement for every 1 inch, so it's double the movement to get through it. Dangerous terrain is difficult terrain, but you have to take a risky action to see if you can move through it. It represents like poison gas clouds or barbed wire fields or any type of thing that might be an impediment on the battlefield that is potentially harmful to your soldiers. When you charge, it can be up to 12 inches. You roll a d6 and add that amount to your movement, and you have to get to within 1 inch of them. If you don't reach it, you still move the indicated amount of distance. Charging does not require a roll on the action success chart. And you cannot ever, under any circumstances, get within 1 inch of an enemy model without charging. Climbing up ladders, stairs, ropes, ramps, that kind of thing can just be done normally. No special there. But if you want to climb a sheer surface, you have to make a risky action check. And if you fail, you just leave them at the bottom. You don't climb at all. You can jump a gap that is up to half your movement, but it is a risky action, and if you fail, you fall. You can voluntarily jump or fall down up to 3 inches without any penalty to movement or ill effect, and you can do it as part of a charge action. If you succeed on a risky action check, you will get +1 bonus dice to your hit rolls for that attack. If you fail that risky check, then you would just stop at as close to the edge as possible and still an inch away. It is also possible to be shot down from an elevated position or by some other effect of the enemy on you. If you're forced to go down and you're on an elevated position, you have to take a action success chart roll. If you pass, you just go down where you are. If you fail, you fall. For each full 3 inches you fall, you add +1 dice to the injury roll that happens when you hit the bottom. We then come to combat, which is split into 2 main types. Obviously, those are going to be ranged and melee. To shoot a ranged weapon, you have to have line of sight and range. If you are in melee, you cannot shoot unless the rules of the weapons indicate otherwise. However, if you are outside of a melee, you can shoot into it. But you got to roll a d6 before you roll your to hit to see on a 1 to 3 if you're going to hit a friendly model, or on a 4, 5, 6 hit an enemy model. Once that's sorted, you just proceed on as normal. When you're making that ranged attack, you choose your weapon, check for the range, roll the action success, and then if you hit, roll on the injury chart. The modifiers can include enemy being behind cover, which is a minus dice. Long range, if it's more than half the weapon's maximum range, it is -1 dice. And if you are shooting from an elevated position, you get +1 dice. Pretty straightforward. And then the very next page is that injury chart. And it's the same injury chart for melee, ranged, fallen down, whatever. It's 2d6, then any bonus or penalty dice. On a 1 or less, there is no effect. On a 2 to 6 is a minor hit, 7 to 8 is a down, and a 9 to 12 is out of action. On a minor hit, you get +1 blood marker. When the model goes down, it gets a blood marker, and when you are attempting to wound a downed model, you get +1 dice to the damage roll. So it's easier to have a down model removed from play. On a down model's next turn, it can stand up for free, but then all of its different types of movement are halved. And then if it's out of action, it's just gone. Bye-bye birdie. There are some modifiers to the injury chart, usually for armor or special abilities like tough, or if the target is being down. But if you've got heavy armor, you're going to get -2 to your injury roll, so you're going to get to pull that number back down. So that is helpful. We then come to melee combat, which is very similar. You declare your weapon that you're going to use, or which of the melee actions you're going to use, roll on the success chart, accounting for plus or minuses for dice that you have, and then consult the injury chart. If you have 2 melee weapons, you can attack with both of them, but one of the attacks is at a -1 dice penalty. Tough creatures will treat out of action results that they receive on the injury chart as down. Now, once they're down, you treat them like any other model. But while they're still on their feet, they are harder to kill. If the defender is defending an obstacle such as a trench or a wall or something like that, the attacker will suffer a -1 dice penalty. You can dive into combat, which is what I mentioned earlier with the charge with coming down from the height. To move away from combat, you can use your move dice, which requires no dice rolling, but the opponent gets to make an immediate attack action at you at +1 dice to both the hit and the injury. You cannot move away from a melee combat if you have already swung that activation, so you would have to forfeit your attack and then move. While in combat, you are free to move around the model or models that you are engaging as long as you stay within an inch of what you are attacking. Once you and your opponent have completed all of your actions with all of your models, we move to the morale phase. So at the end of any turn that half of your team is either down or out of action, you roll the action success chart. If you pass, you're good. If you fail, you flee the battlefield. Clean morale rules. I like that. Sometimes the morale rules get a little bit convoluted for me. That's real clean. I like that. Now here, at the end of turn, it says that the model with the player with the lowest number of models will start the new turn selecting a model to activate. So that may have been for the first turn the person with more models goes, and then it goes differently from there. We then come into a section on keywords, which is just about your basic glossary. Love it when this is an include in a book. We then have a section on starting the warband, which I'm not going to go through that here because I will eventually. It's probably going to take me a little while, but I will eventually get a trial game of this on the table with probably some models that I've just pieced together. We then come into the first of the two factions, which is the Heretic Legion. And it gives you a couple of variants for them as well. So you got your basic ones and then all the equipment they can take and how much that equipment costs and all that good stuff. We then have the Warband Heretic Naval Raiding Party and the variant Trench Ghosts. So it gives you a little bit of variety to play around with there. And again, these are not all of the factions. The next one is Trench Pilgrims. Again, those are going to be, it gives you like kind of a holy side and then a Forces of Hell side to clash against each other. And again, we've got our weapons, our ranged, melee, armor, equipment that they can take and how much it costs. And then we've got two variants, the Procession of the Sacred Affliction and the Cavalcade of the 10th Plague. And each of those will have their special rules and stuff that come with them. And then we have all of the different models, and they have, this is what the profiles look like. So we've got like the name and then how many of them you can have in your force and then their stat line and their special rules, all the fun stuff that they can do. We then come into our armor, weapons, equipment section where it gives you the stats for all the different weapons that your models can have. And then some more of that really cool art. This looks kind of like a Helldiver. Yeah, like a World War I Helldiver. I love it. Love it. Love weird history games and love weird history settings. Then our section for melees, armor, and then it gives us one scenario, two scenarios, three scenarios. We got three scenarios in this starter, and that's it. Again, this is not the finished game. Meaning that, again, the finished product will have things that this doesn't. It will have all the factions. It will have play examples and diagrams to help you understand how those things work. It will have more scenarios. It will have the campaign rules. It'll be a fully fleshed out game. This is just to make sure, to interact with the community and to make sure that the core mechanics of the game work the way that they are intended. I am really excited about this. I love the art. I love weird history and weird type settings like that. It does have a slightly higher model count than I normally go after. But I'm sure I can probably put together like a small elite kind of high cost team and see how that goes versus doing a much larger kind of horde team. 30 to 40 models is usually more than I want to paint for a game, but that doesn't mean that I won't do it, especially if the game is fun and the setting is cool and the lore is cool. And again, there's a fairly extensive lore primer that the creators put out for this. For free to check it out, 100% you should go check out Trench Crusade. Thanks so much for tuning in, hanging out, letting me talk at you for a little bit about Trench Crusade. I hope you have an absolutely amazing rest of your day.